Good with Jesus though, I'll tell you that. Switching LMF and RMF, never forget to switch, man. Any Alrighty dudes, so Jorge Jesus now is one of the most known managers since PES 16 and 17. Pretty aggressive, pretty good, but is it good for PES 2018? Well, not exactly, but that doesn't mean he's a bad manager. I don't know what's gonna happen after the patch is out. You know, if things change, we'll update you. But let's quickly analyze it, alright? Now, obviously, it's quick counter, short pass, wide, flexible. Support range is a little bit too high. And it's frontline pressure and aggressive. Personally, I prefer containment area center. Because why the hell would you want to push your team to go wide? You want to try your best not to make them go wide. You know, because if he crosses, boom, it's a header. Now, compactness high, it's good. But defensive line that high, not good. You always want your defensive line to be lower than your compactness. Always. There are so many managers with a lot of good tactics, but they lack this. I think Konami does that on purpose. They will never give you a perfect manager. Otherwise, it will be so overpowered. So, what I like about Jesus, this 4-4-2, it's very flexible, okay? And I'm going to show you the flexibility with it, and I'm going to show you how I use him. Why do I not start with him? In the meantime, there's another option. You can use the defensive tactic. As you can see, defensive line is low. Still, I don't like the crazy support range. If you guys don't know the support range, the bars from 1 to 10, 1 to 3, from 1 to 3 is low, 4 to 7 is medium, 8 to 10 is high. So originally, I mean, you never want your support range to be higher than 5. Your defensive line never higher than 5. And your compactness never ever lower than 5. Simple as that. So a little quick tactical tips. In terms of squad builder, okay, there are many things we can do. Because with Jesus, right, ideally, it's, I mean, his lineup for Sporting is simple. He uses William Carvalho, which he has like, he is super defensive. You need someone solid there who does not join attack often and also is a good passer. Now, William Carvalho is not an anchorman, he's not a destroyer, he's actually got a build-up card. But for some reason, he's got high defensive prowess and ball winning. And that's what you want from your DMF. High defensive line and ball winning. Normally, we suggest anchorman, destroyer. These are the two. But any DMF, even build-up, if he has ball winning 80+, defensive prowess 80+, and then low attacking prowess. That is the key, basically. On the flank, let's actually put the players there first. So we can either copy Sporting's lineup, because Sporting does use Carvalho there. In the midfield, Sporting uses a whole player, a player who can join attack often to support the two players up front. And LMF and RMF are normally prolific wingers. You know, Jesus don't use players who can track back often. So they literally defend with 5 players and attack with 5 players, according to the tactics what I'm seeing. So what you want to look for, always use a DMF who obviously, for me personally, I mean, I could go with, yeah, I can simply go with Blind if I want to copy Sporting's lineup. Because on PES we don't have a transfer market, we can only do squad builder based on players' playing style card. It's really important, especially your midfield. Anchor, destroyer, box to box, whole player, classic number 10. They play a massive part in your midfield. For our flanks, I can use players like, you know, Moses, or I can use players like Ox. But these guys are box to box. You want to go for someone who doesn't track back often. In the meantime, you want to go for someone who can play a CMF as well. So you have an option to go 4-1-3-2, 4-2-2-2 flat, or you can go 4-3-1-2. But at least one of the flanks should be someone who can play a CMF, and I'll tell you why. I think on this other flank we need someone passer who's going to be left-footed. So you can use one wing to cross with him. Di Maria's left-footed, you know, get crossing in, and Shaqiri's he's left-footed as well. Well, at least Shaqiri's, what's his weak for accuracy? Normally I use someone on the right who is left-footed so he can cut in and finish, and someone on the left who is left-footed who I can use him for crossing. But that's just personal preference. Now, your AMF is a key. For Jesus, by default, Jesus does not have AMF. Okay, we got the alert now. Ailon, thank you again, my man. I think my alert is gonna spam me right now. Thanks again, dude. Your AMF, ideally I prefer someone who can be able to play CMF and AMF, but don't use someone defensive. For example, I could go for Sane if I'm gonna start with AMF, or if I'm gonna start with CMF. I'm gonna use someone like Iniesta, who's a whole player, because you can't go too defensive with a manager that is aggressive. I can easily use, you know, Paulinho there, but I'm gonna show you why I'm using more versatile players who can play different positions. When it comes to your fullbacks, you have an option. Again, make sure one of your fullbacks that is flexible enough to be able to play center back as well. This is basically more in depth. You don't need to make things too complicated, but with Jesus, especially if you're gonna start with him, you kind of need that. Let's say we're gonna use what's his name again? I forgot. Now, he can play as center back as well, and I'll tell you why that is useful. When it comes to your center backs, normally I would go with someone tall and strong and someone fast and mobile. But because our manager is frontline pressure and aggressive with high defensive line, you need rapid center backs. Within reason though, you don't want to go with someone who doesn't really have any ball winning in a way. So Bailey and Rugani will do the job. Now, one of our fullback has to be someone skillful, who can dribble, who can create, who can, you know, do basically overall of everything. Our left back, probably go for Jordi Alba. He doesn't track back often. Goalkeeper, I would go for an offensive goalkeeper so he can play like a sweeper, because frontline pressure and aggressive, high defensive line, you most likely get countered one-on-one with your goalkeeper. So if you have an offensive goalkeeper, he will come out. It could be dangerous a little bit sometimes, but it does the job. If you have a defensive goalkeeper, you know, doesn't mean it doesn't work. Up front, Jesus in real life uses two goal poachers. He does use Dost, which is tall and strong, and another striker, can't remember. So we can either go with, actually, Jesus uses target man. Yeah, I think Dost is a target man. Let me see. I believe I have him. Where is he? Target man. For a reason. For a good reason. I'll tell you why. So we have someone tall and strong. And then next, we will have somebody fast and mobile. I will catch up with you, chat. Just want to get this done and over with. And then we're going to have a goal poacher. Now, why do we have a target man? Because for counters, you want to send a long ball to the target man and then pass it to the striker. But that doesn't mean that's your build-up attack. As soon as you give the ball to your target man, back to the striker, back to the midfield, 1-2, go forward. A lot of people make that mistake. Once they give the ball to their striker, they think that's it, you know, go forward. Unless, of course, you have an open chance to go forward. I'm just going to fill the bench with any players. For me personally, on my bench, obviously a goalkeeper, a centre-back. Not ideally these players that I would use, but let's actually make it perfectly. You want to have someone fast there. We have Blind there. We can actually have an anchor man just in case. In fact, I would rather start with an anchor man. If I want to be more offensive, maybe put a build-up there. But let's just start like that. Another one, you want to definitely have a box-to-box there in case you decided to go diamond. And then always have a super sub. Boom. Next, always have a solid AMF, fast and rapid. I can go for Draxler, good dribbler, good finisher. I can go for, I personally prefer to go for Perotti, kind of for his contract right now. But Sane could do a good job. Where is he? He would do a good job as well here. Next for substitution, make sure we can play a flexible player. Someone like, yeah, I think I would go for Asamoah. For one reason, he can play fullback, LMF, and center midfielder. I know his form is only 4, but, you know, it gives you more option. So, next, when it comes to why Jesus is particular formation is so flexible, right? Now, if you're gonna start like this, by default, the gameplay, there are many ways you can do. You can either go flat 4-4-2, something like this. Flat 4-4-2, right? That's option 1. Option 2, you can go 4-1-3-2. If you want to be super duper offensive, that's what I would recommend. This is like all or nothing. This is like a last resort almost. Even changing the DMF into CMF if you want to be super defensive. But that's going to be very unbalanced. So we can either go 4-4-2 flat as I showed you, or we can go 4-1-3-2, but that is too offensive. Or personally, my personal favorite, what I would do, I would have a center midfielder here, and I would have a right midfielder here, and 2 strikers. So that is basically 4-4-2. Or if you have another one, let's say we're going to start with Keita. Because if you're going to go diamond, what it does, right, if you use 2 center midfielders, that's more a focus on a diamond central. If you use LMF and RMF, you'll have better wide options. However, if I'm gonna use 2 center midfielders, I will go AMF there. But if I'm gonna start with LMF and RMF, I would rather have a CMF to track back, because it depends what kind of players you are using on the flank. So for me, personal favorite, ideally, this is how I would start. However, there's another simple thing. Jordi Alba does not track back often. So I'm going to switch Keita there, right? There we go. So because Jordi Alba does not track back often, we have Keita to cover up for him. On the other side, we can use a centre back. It doesn't matter if Di Maria doesn't track back, because we've got centre back here. Using 3 centre back could be very effective, especially let's say I have a player who's spamming Cristiano on that flank. Boom, change him into centre back. But if you're losing, things are not working, definitely go back to the right back. So I think I've covered everything that you can do with Jesus. And one last tip when it comes to tactics and etc. You would always want to look for, if you sign a manager that is frontline pressure and aggressive, you have to make sure defensive line is not higher than 5. Otherwise it's hard. But the other thing I like about Jesus is the fact, once the team spirit is properly done, you can simply start with his defensive tactic. Now, obviously the difference is with the defensive tactic, boom, defensive line is low. Still not the best, that high support range. You know, the higher the support range, the further the players, your teammate, will stray away from the ball carrier, in a way. So you can use tiki-taka, player will stay close to you, but if you use tiki-taka, your strikers will not make runs behind the defensive line. This is something a lot of people does not like it. If you play direct, tiki-taka is not for you. So ideally, I would probably, if I start with Jesus, I would like to start with the second tactic, which defensive line is 1. If I start with the first one, then you have to make every attack count, because every time you lose the ball, especially when somebody realizes your defensive line is 9, it's going to bombard you with long balls. Now, next we're going to cover up the advanced instructions and then quick gameplay, and then that's us done for Jesus. So everybody will ask question about Jesus. I'll probably club this for YouTube, for Twitch. Next thing, what we're going to talk about, advanced instructions. All right. A lot of people ask me, what advanced instructions shall I use with 4-3-3? What advanced instructions shall I use with this formation? The best explanation I would give you, the best tip I can give you, you know, somebody would say, oh, I use this with this manager, I use this with that manager. It really isn't about what others use. It's about your game, how you play, how is your team, and how does your opponent play when you play certain games. For example, if I'm playing against someone who spams me with long balls, I will simply switch to my second tactic. Obviously, when the team spirit goes high. You're probably thinking, yeah, Seb, you can just use deep defensive line. Yeah, that's right. But when your manager by default, it's already frontline pressure and aggressive, and your defensive line is already 9. The deep defensive line, it will not work constantly, and it will give you a massive gap between your midfield and your center back. It could work at the beginning, maybe let the opponent who's spamming long balls to tire himself out, but it will not work out in the long run. For me personally, I have 2 tactics, okay? The offensive one, I use advanced instructions based on what my opponent does. I use false wingers if I want my wingers to cut in and not go wide. Not sure how that work with the diamond because we don't really have wingers. We have side midfielders. That will still give you the job. Every advanced instruction that tells you what to do. Defense, I normally use it on my DMF because on PES 18, your midfielders join attack often. Hug the touchline. If I can't break someone down the middle, I'll hug the touchline, play wide. Or if you're playing against someone like Santos, very aggressive. You do not want to go down the middle against Santos. Attack and fullback is an option I use if I want to be more offensive. Wing rotation is pretty good. It's one of my favorite advanced instructions. But you will only see the beautiful effect. Aylon, it shows up again. Yo, Aylon, thank you for the third time, man. That is actually my bot's fault. It's not your fault. So back to this. Wing rotation is my favorite. You will only see the effectiveness of wing rotation if you actually stay on the ball. If you're gonna rush your passes, if you're just gonna go direct, there's no point using a wing rotation. It is a pretty good option. Your strikers go left, they switch, they go narrow, they go wide. Let's say you're using Ronaldo as a striker. He can go all the way to the flank, dragging a center back with him, creating a space for your AMF to go in. Just basic football. Tiki-taka, I personally, I'm not a tiki-taka player, I'm a counter player. Normally I use tiki-taka if my manager's support range is really high. I use it to actually make the players stay close to me. But if you use tiki-taka, your strikers will not make runs behind the defense. Sometimes this is good against players who are playing very deep or very good patiently defending. False 9, I use false 9 if I feel like my striker's being marked. Striker drops, pulls the defense with him, boom, counter on the flank. False 9 and hug the touchline is a good combination. Center and target, if it's good if you want somebody just stay there all the time when you cross. If you play a crossing game, obviously center and target will be good. False fullback, now in reality, Pep Guardiola doesn't use false fullback. But I like it. I use it a lot. You know, it will give you more options for quick, narrow passes when your fullback cuts in. But as soon as they cut in and if you get countered, your flank is open. And you never want to give anybody an open flank, because if he crosses, that's it, headers are OP. So that is the advanced instructions. When it comes to your defense, I use wingback if I'm playing 3-5-2 or 3-4-3. Let's say you want to create a lockdown, you're leading by 3 goals, you can use wingback, your players can become more defensive. Deep defensive line, we explained it. Swarm the box, I never ever use swarm the box against a cross spammer, because all you do with the swarmer box, you will give him more chance to go wide, easier chance to go wide. You know, the point of the best way to stop headers is to try to stop the crosser. You got better chance basically stopping a header if you stop the crosser, because once the cross goes in, header is just OP. Or, so the only way you swarm the box if you're playing against someone who's constantly focused down the middle and doing a lot of quick passes around the box. That is the best way to use swarm the box. Counter target, it's pretty good when you have a corner kick on you. You always have a striker up there, whether you use them for that purpose or when your striker have low stamina, you don't want them to come back, or you always want to have somebody there, especially if your manager's build up is long ball. Gegenpress, okay, Gegenpress, this is something everybody spams this year. Even with managers who are already frontline pressure and aggressive, people do spam Gegenpress. Sometimes a lot of people start with Gegenpress and deep defensive line, which logically doesn't make sense. I mean, so when you lose the ball, you want to press but stay deep. How does that work? But for some reason, it says, I don't know. I have no explanation for that. But for some reason, it does work. So I would only use Gegenpress, even double Gegenpress, if I need a comeback. Personally, I like balanced play. A lot of people start with Gegenpress, get a couple of goals quickly, and then they chillax. So that is the advanced instructions covered. Now you're probably thinking, well, Seb, what advanced instruction do you use with Jesus? Well, personally right now, I'll probably go for defense on my DMF and tiki-taka. Or I would go with wing rotation and defense. My defense instructions, I will probably have deep defensive line on and counter target on my big CF basically. So that is pretty much it, guys. But honestly, like, it's not gonna be, it's just super offensive, dudes. That defensive line, it's insane. Defensive line 9, it's fucking insane. And remember, always try to play based you know, according to your manager's tactic. The difference between counter and position: counter, as it shows you here, you play as soon as you get the ball, you counter. As simple as that. You have the ball with the midfield, you want to send a clean through ball. Once you get there, tap in or finish, etc. While with position game, you can't just pass forward directly. If your manager's position game, you need to do a lot of triangle passing backward, vertically, and horizontally. Obviously, build up a short pass. Just look at this, right? Look at this example. Do that. You like print that in your head when your manager is short pass. Do this. You have the ball in the midfield. Go to the flank, back to the striker, back to the midfield, back to the AMF, back to the other flank. If you do this, right? If you do this, you'll be surprised how easily you can break opponent. However, it's not all sunshine and daisies. Maybe when you make the first pass, you will get intercepted and you get countered in a way. So things like that, a lot of people doesn't pay attention. Attacking area wide, personally not a fan. I like center. Positioning flexible is good, but personally, I prefer maintain formation. But on PES 18, flexible is a little bit better. Unless you play very direct, then you would go for maintain formation. So that is pretty much about it, guys. I mean, what would you choose? Like, for those guys on YouTube, you guys on Twitch, I'll talk to you in a bit. But you guys on YouTube, comment down below if you have used them, what you'd agree, what you disagree on. We literally covered everything with Jesus. This is how I would personally start. Everything I'm doing here has a purpose. I have a CB on the flank because Di Maria does not track back. I have a box-to-box here because Jordi Alba doesn't track back often. So you can either start like this, or you can start with LMF and RMF, as I explained it before. If I use LMF and RMF, again, no AMF. I would only use AMF if I have one side as a CMF who can track back. If you go LMF and RMF with the AMF, then this is like super duper offensive in a way. I'm trying to think what have I forgot so nobody will have any questions with Jesus. This is like an overall, you know, now you'll have some knowledge about tactics and advanced instructions, and plus how diamond formations work in general. Now you're probably thinking, after all this talk, we want to see some gameplay. Well, for you guys on Twitch, we're going to be using Jesus tonight. And for you guys on YouTube, you can catch up on my stream, or I will upload some highlights. I use Moran as well, but that's a different story. Moran is natural diamond, and it's AOD, it's no frontline pressure. It's more defensive and it's more balanced with Moran. Plus build up is long ball. It's more direct. When it comes to the gameplay, if you were using a flat 4-4-2, if you were using flat 4-4-2 just by default, there's no point having LMF and RMF if you're not going to play for them. When you have a flat 4-4-2, start your attack, just think about the triangle that you have. DMF, RMF, striker. That triangle. That little triangle there. And on the other side as well. I mean, flat 4-4-2 could be a little bit predictable as well. You have the ball always from your defense to your LMF or RMF. And then if you have a space to striker, once you give the ball to striker, don't be too direct, back to the midfield and then back to the flank. Just work that triangle out. If you've given the ball directly to your strikers, try to do a lot of pass between those two strikers until your LMF and RMF can catch up, give you more passing options. If you're going to go more proper diamond with the AMF, if you're going to start something like this, again, it's like almost the same scenario. It's hard to talk about gameplay. It's better when I actually show it, and we will do that. I mean, with this lineup, you want to take advantage of that triangle, you know, back and forth, and then you have a triangle with Rafinha, Di Maria, and Rodrigo, and then Dost, Rafinha, and Keita, and then here again, you got to work all these triangles. Even your center back, you have a triangle here. The only area you need to focus to cover is that area between two center backs. Obviously, these gaps. So when you lose the ball, just make sure you select your flanks, bring them narrow. That's all you got to do. Mainly, never touch your defense unless it's necessary. Oh my god, I talk too much. So, for those of you guys on Twitch, we're done with this. We're going to jump into gameplay. And for you guys on YouTube, hope you enjoyed the video. Comment down below, share and subscribe. PESEP